Welcome everybody to EI's Expert Series webinar. We are glad to have you with us today. And as everybody joins in, just a quick glimpse of EI. We are powered by MPS and we lead an emotionally intelligent learning design, guiding our clients through digital transformation across the globe. While you're there in the webinar, throughout this session, please do get involved, ask questions, share in the chat, and join the polls. You'll receive the recording by email after the session, along with a few strategic thought leadership assets that we will be sharing. For starters, it will be great to see where each one of you is joining from. Do drop that in the chat. Today, we have a very accomplished array of panelists that we will engage with, and I will introduce them one by one for you. I'll begin with Vineet Taneja. He is a consultant and a coach who's very passionate and purpose-driven about growth for individuals and institutions. He focuses on culture and leadership development, drawing on his experience at J&J, Gillette, and Airtel. Since 2013, he has led Resonance Consulting and now serves also as an independent director at Ashiana Housing, a leader in senior living. A very warm welcome to you, Vineet.
Yes.
Up next is Divya Verma, who is a senior consultant with over 20 years in leadership development, culture, engagement, and learning. She led Kincentric's engagement and culture practice and held leadership roles at Inspire One and Gallup, advising executive teams all across APAC. A seasoned trainer and coach, Divya is known for enabling performance through people strategy. Welcome, Divya, to this webinar.
Thank you, and hello, everyone.
Next, we have Archana Jayaraj, who leads EI's global operations with a focus on process excellence and driving revenue growth. With over 16 years of experience in strategic leadership and skill development, she has played a pivotal role in closing gaps, skill gaps, really, and pioneering innovative solutions in the talent and learning space, thus enabling organizations to stay ahead in the competitive landscape. And finally, I'm Soma Bhaduri, a learning and performance consultant with over 20 years of experience. I specialize in learning design that helps in maximizing ROI, focusing on global learning strategy, workforce enablement, and performance ecosystems. As you all can see, we have a highly engaging and action-packed agenda lined up. So whether you're leading teams, enabling others, or shaping learning strategies, today's conversation is about what it truly takes to build future-ready leaderships. So as we begin, do please drop your thoughts in the chat. What hurdles come to mind when you think of leadership development? Keep sharing your views while we kick off this conversation formally. So what I will do is I'll bring up the first section, the first topic, which is the leadership model of the future. What do we mean by that, and what are we saying here? Here's what research has to say, and it's up on the screen for you. But we're also very interested to understand and take your views. So here comes your first poll. You will see that coming up on your screen. To take a minute, participate in the poll, and let us know your views. Okay. Can we have the poll results up, please? That's heartening to see. Emotional intelligence is one of the most critical skills in your context. Very truly so. And I think it well resonates with what we are going to discuss and about to discuss now. So I'll bring up my first question to the panelists, and I will go to you, Divya. In your experience, what's that one key leadership skill or mindset, a shift in mindset, I would say, that's essential as we're moving into a very highly AI and tech enabled leadership and work culture?
Thanks, Soma. I think, I saw the poll and I was very happy to see what people are thinking as well. Because for me, the number one thought when it comes to essential leadership skill is emotional intelligence. Leading with empathy, understanding, building self awareness start, because that's the start of emotional intelligence. And then really, trying to build organizations where it's not transactional, right? So there is a deeper understanding of what people need and the relationships that we build, therefore. And I think this is becoming even more critical in the time of AI. So while in my research and all the literature that we are reading and we are hearing about, um, what we are seeing is that either organizations are jumping into AI too fast without really knowing what they want to get out of it, because it seems to be what the rest of the world is doing, or there is a fair amount of being that ostrich with your head in the sand. So thinking it's not going to affect me or my industry, or it's not relevant for my work. However, a lot of research points that, in, let's say, the top 100, 200 organizations, at least a third are already using AI in some capacity. And with that come risks. You need stronger accountability and governance. And, so therefore, leaders need to be able to not lose that empathy which they need to in fact bring out even more, to say that where do we use it and what advantages is it bringing for us, right? So balancing out the need for still maintaining the human intelligence and touch. So therefore, uh, the human intelligence sits on top of what AI can support us, right? So it's really not replacing, but it's actually a way of enhancing how the organization looks at problem solving, innovation, data analytics, and all of that, and also mitigating the risk and building accountability, right? Because with AI also comes a lack of, or the risk of loss of privacy, biases, misinformation. And so, where do you strike that balance as a leader? And you can't do that unless you've built your style, which is rooted in a sense of self and emotional intelligence. So for me, these are the two very topical leadership skills at the moment.
Thank you. And I think that's really very insightful. I mean, you've touched upon something that truly is critical and, we should be mindful about when it comes to leadership development or skill development overall. I'll come to you next, Vineet, for your views. What would you have to say? What is that one skill or mindset shift?
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with Divya. And perhaps what I have to say falls in a similar larger domain, but I'll use some different terminology. So one thing I'll say is that a growth mindset seems to be critical. And when I talk about growth mindset, I mean, there are different ways of interpreting it. But for example, one thing is the ability to unlearn. I remember as a practical example that for almost 10, 12 years, I taught quality and reliability training. And I used to go around telling everybody that what you can't measure, you can't manage. And this is so true in the leadership and management world. But as I went deeper into my own journey, I realized that the two things that drive you the most, and you can't measure them, is love and fear. So I actually had to unlearn all that I was teaching all these years. And by unlearn, I mean I had to integrate the thought of being able to work with things that you can't measure and work along with the fact that you can measure them. So I think this is one thing I want to say. And the other is, a lot of us talk about competencies. I remember working in an organization where there was a competency of empowering and developing. And the competency of empowering and developing, we used to teach people how to build robust development plans, how to have conversations which are enabling, etc., etc. But it was strange that 70% of the performance dialogues used to happen in the last 3 days. The dialogues were probably truncated in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes. And 80% of the performance appraisals were uploaded on the system in the last 2 days. So the question was, whilst we were teaching everybody everything to do with competencies, what was missing was the capacity of empathy. So I believe that the mantra really, as we go deeper into subjects like AI, is to really start focusing on the next lower layer, the next deeper layer, which might be empathy, which might be courage, which might be other things, harmony, for example. How do you do that is a big topic in itself. So I think this is really what I would like to leave behind as a thought for the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think both Divya and Vineet have touched upon something which is very unlike the tech or we're saying tech is reshaping or AI is taking over. But Archana, what do you have to say about this?
Well, Soma, first off, I think the 14% stat that you showed very briefly, right? It doesn't surprise me because at the end of the day, the challenge, according to me, is not so much identifying the skills, but also nurturing the leadership mindsets to evolve faster than the world around us because everything is changing around us. And I think the most future ready leaders are those who have mastered what we can call a mental zoom, the ability to zoom out, see the big picture, but equally be able to pivot, zoom in, and hone in on the specifics if things get a little messy or problematic. So these are people who can see patterns and go beyond just the problems. And I think system thinkers also ask a lot of good questions, and that changes everything. So when we talk about, let me give an example. There was one leader that I worked with, and every time there's a strategy session, he would sketch 3 scenarios on the whiteboard. And this was not really about predicting what is going to happen, but it's really about preparing the team to think in terms of scenarios. And I think that's system thinking in action. So if I had to maybe give a parallel, if strategy is like, a GPS, then leadership today is like Google Maps in peak traffic, and we're constantly trying to reroute. And I think that adaptability is very important.
Yes. Right. Thank you. I think all three of you touched upon something that is very crucial. And while we're talking about a strong, emphasis that has to be there on future-ready leadership skills, there are these 3, I would say, critical aspects that you see on your screen that we also need to address, right? And they're all interconnected, as we well know. So with that, I bring up the next poll question that you see on your screen. Let me take your views. To share your thoughts, please participate, and we'll have our panelists share their views as well. We give it a few more seconds. Thank you. So we have 43% of you that are actively addressing these aspects, and it's great to see that. And a very close 38% that are seeing early signs and monitoring it closely. This shows that, the statistics that we've pulled out with our research back the data that you're saying. It's a very, very, very close percentage that you notice from our, research to what you've just said. So clearly, burnout's on the rise, and there's no going back on that. But how are we building trust, safety, and honest check-ins to keep everyone grounded? So a leader and their teams. For this, I'll come to you, Vineet. I know this is something very close to your heart. So would you like to touch upon this and talk more about it to our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Soma. I think, the words close to my heart is prophetic because a lot of my learning came when I was laid up with a suspected heart attack at the age of 35. And a lot of my trajectory orbit shift happened as a result of that. And then in 2020, I was laid down with a pretty bad attack of COVID and was in the hospital for almost a month. So I think, wounded soldiers often know a lot more about war than successful ones. So what I have really realized over time is that what we may think of as human beings and not as leaders is the whole focus on holistic well-being. And the one most common, for example, is physical. But in physical, let me just give you one data. The one that we least focus on is sleep. What is the quality of our sleep and what is the quantum of our sleep? I mean, for example, there are surveys which will tell you that 50% of C-suite executives are sleep deprived. And a part of their burnout is happening as a result of that. So it's a very interesting piece of information other than whatever else. If I talk about emotional, I think when I went through my heart attack, I realized that I could have made two choices in my life at that time. One was to be very complaining about the fact, why me? But I think the shift that happened in my mind was to start feeling grateful because some very interesting things happened as a result of having that heart attack. I was able to leave the shores of a multinational, being a cog in a cog, to actually doing something that I was passionate about and proficient in. So to me, the whole piece of gratitude, replacing complaining, was a very big learning of my life. And I think in emotion, if I have to say one thing, being grateful, I think, is a leadership quality that can stand us in really good stead. And when we talk about spiritual, for example, I mean, spiritual means different things to different people. But for me, spiritual is, can I live on purpose and live with values? So, somewhere in the same journey of discovery of mine, I coined a phrase called resonance, which is now the name of my company. And what I realized was that when you say live in alignment, I have to live in inner and outer alignment. And I'm using probably a Hindi term called I have to figure out what is my swabhav, which means what is my true nature? What am I good at? Really good at, spontaneously, naturally, and effortlessly good at, which is probably a God given talent. What am I really passionate about? And can I put my passion and my proficiency into a professional choice so that the thrill and skill are aligned into a drill? And I think the moment I bring that alignment and I start living authentically in values, I can actually move this world. And I have an inner locus of control and I am resilient. So I think if you really want to talk about resilience, for example, living in gratitude and living in resonance to me are two major mantras. I mean, there's a whole world out there and a lot of things can be said, but if I have to summarize, I would really put these two on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a very different way of looking at how we talk about burnouts, but how that can actually be sort of reshaped, I would say, into having longer, retaining your employees in the best way possible in a more holistic manner, developing your leaders and making them resilient leaders with a completely different thought process and approach. Divya, what would you say about this?
I think I got a bit lost listening to Vineet and some of the points he was raising because a lot of that makes so much sense for all of us. I think from my experience of working with leaders, number one is helping leaders realize that they need to acknowledge this. Often, this is the topic which is they're not very open to talk about, or they're worried to talk about because they feel we may not have a solution, and you open a box and you don't know what to do with the information that you receive. So I think first and foremost for me, what lies at is, of course, there are tools, there are systems available, especially post the pandemic. Companies have got, have put together helplines and AI tools for mental well-being and all of that, which I'm sure are helping. But also building on that basis of trust, a culture which is deeply rooted in psychological safety. where people can actually talk about how they're feeling, not just to complain, but to co-create solutions to say, okay, how do we work around, this deliverable that we have that requires to be done, but the fact that somebody's actually struggling here and unable to actually complete that, what is the support that we can provide? So bringing in some of that authenticity and conversation in a safe way, I think, is something leaders have to own much more than what we typically see in organizations. Wherever leaders do that and create that sense of engagement, even those longer hours don't always cause the kind of burnouts that they do in other environments, right? So that is a very important piece. Again, going back to where we started with, leading with empathy, creating that trust and building that psychological safety where people can actually, uh, talk about some of these problems. And in your culture as well, bringing some of those concepts of simplicity to say, okay, have you scheduled a break? Have you, is lunch hour sacred? At least a couple of times a week, have you done that? Helping people take time off, helping people switch off when they require. So building some of these systems more proactively rather than what organizations do and leave it to chance to say that people will figure out their own way, which I think is not helping a lot of people.
Right, right. Archana, any last thoughts on this piece?
Well, I think the two speakers before me have pretty much covered it all. But the other day I was reading something about energy intelligence. We all talk about time management, task prioritization, but equally, it's also important to look at the energy flow. And I think this is a very mindful habit, which should be quite useful, right? To evaluate what drains me or what restores me. And this is something that I would encourage everybody to do. So I think the onus is, to a large extent on the individual, but equally the leadership to protect the time margin. Again, to Divya's point, can we have like a 15-minute break, say between two intense or two difficult meetings? Because it's not just about showing up, it's also about showing up as your best self. So I think I want to reiterate that burnout is not a badge. Often there's a lot of pressure that, we feel that we have to be overworked. We have to stretch ourselves to the limit. So it's really not a badge. And I think I learned this. It rather hit me once when I sent a mail to someone at 2 a.m. And the next day, they said in the flow that, yeah, I saw the mail and I couldn't sleep after. So that really woke me up. Was it that important for me to have sent that mail at 2 a.m. or could I have waited till the morning? So this is, I think, the underlying message.
Thank you. And I think all of you have touched upon something which, to me as a learning designer, I would rather say, there are these finer nuances that we must keep in mind when we are designing leadership programs and not just skim through the surface and, say these are the 10 things that you must acquire as a leader and forget about it. So a very different perspective, I would say, on how we should look at developing future-ready leaders. Well, with that, and very well so, from burnout to resilience, let's shift to what's next, and nothing better than succession planning, leadership readiness, because yes, you need to do that, and that's one of the most important strategies. Like we see on the screen that you have, the statistics say that only 30% of the leaders believe that their succession planning is effective. But why so? What is missing in succession planning overall? And how could you better prepare future leaders? For this piece, Archana, I'll come to you and would like to hear what you'd have to say to us.
Thank you, Soma. So first off, I think succession is kind of treated like an insurance, something you do in case of an emergency. But I think if we flipped it and looked at it as a growth engine, it would be a completely different ballgame. And the pyramid that you have on the screen pretty much sums it all quite beautifully because it also shows us that it's not a very linear exercise, but quite a layered approach that one needs to take. So right at the bottom, the foundation is when we map the competencies needed, not just for the role that it is today, but where it's heading and what it could evolve in the future. For example, one universal future requirement that we would definitely require would probably be leaders who can navigate AI-powered teams. And then we get to the next layer, which is, the diversity aspect. And when we say diversity, it's not just about demographics. We're also talking about diversity in perspectives, leadership styles, and even lived experiences. Because each of these future pipelines, they should reflect the complexity of the world that the leaders are going to navigate in reality. And with this also comes, I would say, early exposure, because as we build these pipelines, it's we need to make sure that they have adequate opportunity to expose themselves to real scenarios. For example, can a mid-level manager be picked to work on, say, a workshop that's being led by a bunch of VPs? Not because they're ready, but maybe because you believe that they could rise up to the occasion. And then, of course, we get to the third layer, which is, I would say, intentional coaching and mentoring, because performance reviews are like mirrors and coaching is like a window, I would say. So when we talk about coaching, it could be any format for that matter. It could be peer-led formats, cross-level formats, whatever it may be. They could be beautiful accelerators when staggered over a significant period of time. And finally, of course, the apex is competency-based succession mapping. And organizations sometimes can fall short here, because when we pick successors, you might be looking at tenure, you might be looking at their past performance, but it's very important to remember that future leaders could also be the quiet disruptors. So I talked about patterns way back when I mentioned systems thinking, and I think I would just bring that back again, because it's not necessarily about who's the loudest, it's really about who's the clearest when we're looking at building our future leadership bench. And finally, maybe something to add is it's also important when we're looking at building a future leadership pipeline to look at having these future fit signals as part of the talent and performance reviews. Because it's not a one-time activity, but more an evolving exercise when we can look beyond who's a good performer today, but also at, are they influencing people beyond their teams, beyond their silos? Are they learning, and keeping themselves future ready? Are they asking difficult questions? I think that's also an important trait. So that's my piece, Soma.
Thank you. I think you very well summed up how, or at least I would say, a broad-based framework of what one can follow while preparing their future leaders effectively. Divya, I would like to hear your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on, succession planning and preparing leaders?
I think Archana summarized it beautifully. A few additional points came to mind as I was listening to her. And one is the correction for unconscious bias in this process. What often happens, and I think when we spoke about the fact that you're not replacing a leader, but you're filling that role in context of what is demanded of that role in the future. And I often still see organizations, applying that subjective lens to say this person is similar to the person, who's currently in that role. And so rather than building diversity, you're curtailing it, and that unconscious bias of similarity keeps creeping in, which is where better tools, better data, better quality assessments over merely, some of the old ones that we might be using, like a 360, etc., which still may have some value, but may not be holistic, in helping define what you need from the person. And also making sure that there is an individualized aspect to the learning development of the person, you're grooming into certain roles, including thinking about mentoring. Of course, it's an important aspect to help people find, not just internally but even externally, if we find outside the organization, find strong mentors for them to guide them. These are some additional points that came to mind as I listened to Archana. Yeah.
Very valuable, because I think especially the unconscious bias bit is something that we often see happening unconsciously. But the comparison and, trying to fill in or finding similarities or differences, or not really respecting the individuality of uh, person that you're really trying to groom into a leadership role, and not the person that was already there, or leading that role, etc. I think that's something we truly need to be mindful about. Vineet, you've seen, several, I would say, in your career and work, related to a similar topic. What would you have to say about this?
So I'm very tempted to take a very different spin here. My take and understanding is leaders are entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter whether they work within the organization or they have their own businesses that they're running, but they are entrepreneurs at heart. So the question is that what are the two big characteristics of entrepreneurs that we have to focus on developing? I believe the first characteristic is allowing them and enabling them to dream big. You know, I worked under Mr. R.S. Pawar when I joined IQL after Gillette. And uh, on the first day that I joined, and I was the second or third employee, he asked me the question, Vinny, do you dream? So, like a true left-brained, system-driven guy, I said, yeah, of course I dream in my sleep. He said, no. Do you dream when you're awake? Now, this is a gentleman who had set up the largest IT education company in Asia, NIIT. So I couldn't take that question very casually. So I said, no, I don't. He said, you have the next 2 days, you're just joining this company. I want you to dream about this organization. And I want you to write down all that you see this organization doing 5, 10, 15 years from now. I can tell you I sweated because as a multinational guy, I had no idea how to do. I was looking at dreaming as a process, etc. But something shifted in me that night when I gave up. And I wrote about 20 pages the next day. Believe it or not, what I am doing now, and this exercise I did in 1995, 30 years later, I am doing what I wrote that day. So such is the power of dreaming. How can we as organizations and leaders encourage people to dream and dream big? In fact, Airtel has dreaming big as one of its DNAs. It never publicized its DNAs as such, but we knew it. The second thing I would say is that apart from dreaming big, how do you create conditions and psychological safety for failing? Because when you're stretching yourself, you will fail. And we look at failure in a very, down, disparaging manner. So how do you create conditions? How do you create that space? To me, that space creation is a very critical piece of leadership development in an organization. So I think I would just say that these are the two things my go-to.
Thank you. I think you've actually taken a different route, and I'm sure that has sort of brought up a totally different facet of how we can look at succession planning and preparing leaders for the future. Well, with that, we come to the last section, the final section of our discussion, and truly, how should you design impactful leadership programs? What should be the learning design strategy? What will help our leaders truly develop the way we want them to? So, if we want leaders to be truly future ready, what should their learning experiences look like? Would be my question, and I would pose it to you, Divya, and I would like to hear your insights on how this can be taken forward through learning journeys.
I think I'll take a step back, Soma. Before we talk, I know you're also going to talk a little bit around, creating journeys which are engaging and impactful and create the desired outcomes for learners and organizations. But I'd like to take a step back and maybe start with saying that what are the principles we keep in mind, right? So number one would be, what is the business priority? What is your alignment with the business priority that you're creating for this particular learning approach or journey for, right? And so let's say if you're working on a problem of innovation or customer obsession or growth in a particular area, or it's profitability that's your business priority, what are therefore some of the needs from the leadership or people in the organization that we need to build up to actually address some of those business priorities, right? So if you start with that lens, you sharpen your objectives of the learning design and objectives of the learning program very clearly at the start. I think what that does is give you a stronger understanding of both the design as well as the content you want to create. That's one. The other is then making sure that while there are options available today in both synchronous and asynchronous ways of learning, there is the ability for self-learning that is very sort of catered to the individual, because not everybody will start at the same level on various topics that you might have in mind. And there is, of course, enough opportunity for group learning and co-learning, right? Whether it's with experts in labs, or it's in action learning projects, or work shadowing, or other group activities that you plan for, right? The other thing which I think is very important to build into a good learning program is the assessment piece, right? So where are we starting? Whether that is through, again, self-reflection, supervisory leadership reflection, not just from the individual, but also a state of the readiness of the organization. So if you're actually creating people with a higher sense of awareness on certain topics, is the organizational culture ready to accept what that would bring, right? Are they ready to support the outcomes that is likely to drive? So a sense of assessment, which you can of course build at the start, at the end, and in between, to see, are we on the right track, depending on what assessments you choose. And assessment is not typically as a in the traditional form of a questionnaire, but a pipeline of ideas that this is generating, or other outcomes that you see here. And then, of course, meaningful design, like I said, would include both asynchronous and synchronous aspects as well, right? So whether that is through bite-sized learning, gamification, which is becoming very popular, case studies and all of that, but also through getting in experts and creating learning in that cohort, which can be very engaging for people, right? When you link the two, when you think about what the assessment told you about the learner and what your content and design is, you can make sure that you're also therefore making space for that getting to know myself, or learn, it's leading myself, not just leading others and leading business that I'm trying to achieve out of this design that I've put together, right? I also find that in your journey, if you can think about executive involvement, whether it's through sponsorship of projects, it's through kickoff sessions, it's through fireside chats, sharing of their own stories, problems and risks they have taken, failures that they have, come out of, and how they've built something better as a consequence of that. The more you build in some of that buy-in, again, the more impact you create for the larger learning population, as well as for the organization in itself. uh, and the last thing, I know I've taken a lot of time, is making it easy for the learner. So rather than having people go into different places for different things, if you can create an integrated technology platform where things are accessible, even from your agenda to your project to your your own personal learnings, etc., it's just easier to track, manage for everyone. I think that's important for me as well. And of course, in the end, the feedback evaluation, which needs to, again, not just be a one time, but a more continuous process. You constantly are making your journey smarter and course correcting along the way if required. Yeah, I think for me these design principles matter, and I know that in today's world with technology, there are a lot of collaborative platforms, micro learning opportunities, create e-learning courses that individuals can opt for, that can be built into their own personal learning as well. So that would be something I'd like to start with, and of course, happy to hear from the others on the panel as well.
Sure, and thank you for sort of really leading this discussion in the right direction, I would say, when it comes to the learning design and learning journey perspective. I, being a learning designer myself, and that being my core role, I'd like to just touch upon how we have, as an organization, reimagined, I would say, leadership training from what we used to even a couple of years back. Because there is, like we've discussed, over the last hour or so, there's an innate sense of, the need to shift mindset, the skills, the experiences that the future-ready leaders need for them to thrive. I mean, they just don't need to survive; they need to thrive in an environment which is radically different from what it was a couple of or some time back. And very beautifully, like you said, technology is something that we always say should leverage, equip us, and enable us. And that is exactly what we're doing here at EI. So while there are several strategies and several design, I would say, strategies that we opt for when we are creating these very personalized, curated leadership learning journeys, all because every leader or a would-be leader, an existing leader, everybody is different as an individual. So it never can be a one-size-fits-all kind of a journey for anyone. So what we're trying to do is put together several aspects of what can make them better leaders, and some of the aspects that you see on the screen. So the leadership labs, here I would like to bring in the context of a metaverse, and we're creating some with a couple of our customers. It's a parallel universe, like most of you know, where in one space you actually can learn, collaborate, think, engage, assess everything, and even build your critical leadership capabilities. So all the assets, all the learning, I would say, the modalities, the formats can all be strung together into a metaverse, and that can be one of the sources of learning. In parallel, there are other AI-driven sort of learning journeys that we're creating, very typically where we're not just seeing, how are you proficient in terms of your skill, but also in terms of, the reflective capacity that you bring in, your thought, your vision as a leader, and where do you want to be, right? For any leader, a social or collaborative format of learning is utmost important. There again, we leverage technology with our the modern LMSs and LXPs that are so well equipped to drive peer-to-peer networking, insights. You can have discussion forums, collective problem solving, cohort-based discussions, and this is something that we're also trying to twine and tie up into our journeys that we create for leaders. And finally, coaching, like we've said, and there can't be better way of, I would say, continuous and ongoing learning. AI-enabled coaching is something that, from a modern perspective, is that we're looking at. And these could be the personalized growth paths that can be driven by real-time development insights. So these can come from your managers, your supervisors, a peer, and so on. And they use the data or the available data in the organization, the LXPs, and drive that together to create a holistic and wholesome learning journey. Well, I will wrap this session quickly, but I will definitely take Archana, your inputs, and then Vinit's before I wrap this and move to the Q&A.
So, in the interest of time, I'll keep it really brief. I think the success of any, leadership learning journey is a combination of structured learning path, of course, but also with stretch opportunities, essentially combining mirroring and labs put together. And of course, we can't really, ignore the power of AI. And as you rightly mentioned, you have personalized growth path, for example, or even, considering the fact that we have people at different starting points with different end goals in mind, AI can play a phenomenal role in terms of creating adaptive journeys, and also even on a day-to-day basis, like a weekly dashboard. For example, the other day we were talking to one of our clients, and we're building a dashboard for them where it can basically give week-on-week progress in terms of how the managers were they inclusive enough, did they encourage dialogue among their teams. So they're getting this on a week-on-week basis. So multiple possibilities out there. Over to Vinit, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I think, I believe that our job as leaders is to build triple E organizations, which means effective, endearing, and enduring. So one component of the job is organization success. The other component is institution building. If I have to focus on the latter, which is institution building, that seems to be a critical thing for which leaders have to be prepared. And I have found two things absolutely a must as far as those leadership learning journeys are concerned. One is the whole focus of leading self. I mean, if I can't lead self, how do I really lead others? So all that we've said about personal mastery, emotional intelligence, these are very critical pieces, growth mindset. These are all have to be first implemented in terms of leading self. And the other side is leading change. Because if I have to really build institutions, I have to understand how to lead change. So I would say that whichever way we build these journeys, one is, of course, the business way of looking at it, but the other dimension is the institution building dimension of it. And keep these two dead center in the journeys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So while we wrap up our active discussion, I would ask our participants, what's that one leadership shift that you're walking away with today? Do drop it in the chat, and we move to the Q&A section. I have 3 questions. I will read them out. I don't have the name for the first person that has posted this, and I would encourage our panelists to please chime in and answer. The first question is, given the rising leadership burnout and stress, what are some specific strategies that organizations can implement to reduce attrition? Anybody, any one of the panelists that wants to take this, please.
So I think if I can just answer that, my perspective is creating the right kind of space in the organization. The space of psychological safety, for example, and focusing on holistic well-being as a long-term intervention rather than some kind of uh, what do they say, flavor of the month kind of intervention. So, and these interventions can last a very long time. So providing that safe space and building a holistic well-being intervention which lasts long enough to be institutionalized would be my 2 goals.
Thank you. Archana, Divya, any strategies that you'd like to suggest for retention?
I think it's also again a systemic change in terms of the when we say burnout, we're really talking about the opposite of burnout is actually recovery. It's not so much rest, and there has to be a way in which both of this is balanced. Because, for example, maybe as leaders, we should also set good examples. And I think what we do, maybe the rest of the teams also replicate. So when it comes to living by action, maybe some good best practices might be ensuring that people are being more efficient within the time allocated so that there is no need to spill over beyond that. I think these are some small nudges that we could build into the system.
Just a small additional point here is that leveraging data can be useful as well. So, are we actually tracking the right data? I mean, apart from our basic productivity, etc., are we tracking decline in performance, sick days people are taking, participative in, project participation going up and down? Are we actually looking for triggers and therefore being able to customize solutions to our employees as well, in a more thought through manner, right? So versus being hit by a surprise in the end, like Vineet saying, what is our long-term holistic strategy, and leveraging data to give you early warning signs as well, right? Because sometimes even individuals don't realize that they're heading in that direction till it's too late. So, actually proactively working on this is important.
Right. And thank you for that. I'll take the next question, which is from Akila. And they've said, have you considered taking motivation into your succession mapping? Did you know it can also help identify motivation-based unconscious biases? So any one of you that wants to answer this?
Maybe I will jump in. I think motivation is a key factor because there are enough and more studies which show that certain gender, certain demographics are probably much more upfront and open to ask about what they want. Or we also talk about, say, gender pay gaps, for instance. That's because they say women may not necessarily be assertive enough when it comes to communicating what they want. So of course, these are all, certain biases that could have built up over a period of time. It is, I would say, a function of many things, not quite simple as just that one attribute of gender, demography, age, background, etc., but really a combination of all of this. So you're absolutely right. We need to also make sure that people are able to spot their true potential. So I remember somebody once telling me that as a leader, it's not about being a lighthouse that you show light to everybody, but it's about you being that matchstick that can enable that spark in people around you. So I think motivating those in your team, motivating those in your organization is a very, very critical aspect as well. And it probably is critical that we also identify who has potential but is not confident enough, to your point, Akila.
Yeah, thank you. Any thoughts, Vineet or Divya?
I think, I think that covers it for me. Nothing really more than that. I think, understanding unconscious biases goes beyond just succession planning for me. It's a much larger topic. It's a very topical thing in learning journeys as well at the moment for a lot of organizations. And I think the more we do that, the more, we tackle it in different parts of our talent management strategy, not just in succession planning. So I think we systematically need to work through this.
Right. Okay, and I come to the final question, which is a very, I think, something close to all our hearts. How does one hold on to AI, the growing age of AI? Do you have any tips?
I was sorry, I just, something came to my mind as I read this question. I was speaking with somebody who's a very senior marketing leader, and he was talking about how the marketing function has been one of the early adopters of AI, right? Because you're getting market data and your content is getting, often created through using AI tools, etc. He said that it's, and therefore he sensed a lot of uh, either excitement in the people that he's working with or also fear to say that, how is this going to change our jobs, our roles, what's going to happen here? And he realized, through working through some of this, that uh, you can't really understand, AI can't really give you your marketing campaign that connects emotionally with your customer. That needs the human element to sit on top of whatever content and information or data AI has fed you. So AI in that particular area could be an enabler, but it's not the outcome. It's not going to drive the outcome. And that's, I think, where that understanding of where emotions are important comes in. And that, I think, goes through all of to other aspects of the organizations functionally as well. Is that yes, it is going to help you speed up certain processes. It's probably going to give you data which you didn't have, analytics that you didn't have access to the degree that you require. However, it cannot answer the question without, us understanding how to use that effectively. And that's where that lens of empathy, what does this mean? How does this impact people? All of that needs to be the final layer above all of that, right? And that's how you hold on to emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is also understanding how this is changing our world and therefore how we need to support people in that process as well. Yeah.
Yes. Archana or Vineet, any thoughts from you on this?
So let me pitch in with my two bits. I think the first thing I would say, maybe tongue in cheek, is hold on to AI in the growing age of AI. But AI here is not artificial intelligence, but appreciative inquiry. Start connecting more deeply with people in the spirit of appreciation. Start focusing more on strengths rather than limitations so that you create a lot of positive energy. And as far as holding on to EI individually is concerned, I would simply say some practices. For example, can you practice gratitude almost as building a muscle? Can you sit down at the end of every night and write down 3 to 5 things that you were grateful for today? Can you make sure that you practice mindfulness at least 2 to 3 times, even if it's 1 minute of a breathing, just to stay conscious and become aware? So things about, EI is nothing in the end about except for saying self-aware, others aware, relating to self, and managing self and relating to others. So a few simple practices can actually help you build that muscle. on which you can then build a lot over it. So I think that would be my response.
Sure. Thank you. Archana, anything from you?
Well, AI, of course, is here to stay. And, while AI can throw a lot of data, a lot of analysis, I think at the end of the day, we still need somebody to derive meaning out of it all. So I remember reading this somewhere that, somebody said, treat AI as your co-pilot, but your emotional intelligence, your EI as the pilot of trust. Because at the end of the day, you still have to anchor whatever meaning or whatever you derive out of it should come from your own emotional intelligence, which is very critical for a leader.
Right. And I will wrap it up by saying, we say learner-centric design, learner-centric learning design, and that is emotional intelligence. We, no matter what AI throws at you, of course, an AI should be an enabler in, like we said, data analytics, understanding inputs, but the learner at the center of everything, or the human or the individual at the center of everything. So that's where AI comes in, and that's how we ensure EI in the age of AI in everything that we do. Okay, I do not see any further questions, so I will consider that, we've answered everything to the best of our ability today. With that, all the participants and registrants will receive our high impact leadership ebook and the strategy brief, along with the session recording as promised at the beginning of our session. For any further queries, insights, inputs on how to develop great learning strategies for your leadership programs, leadership development, do please contact us at the email that you see on your screen. And with that, we would like to thank you for joining us today. And a special thanks to all our wonderful panelists for your valuable insights. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a learning experience for me as well to hear from Archana and Vineet, and some of the questions have triggered some really important conversations. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vineet, Divya, and Soma.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Soma.